Fort Duquesne, presently located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, began construction in April 1754 after the French dismantled a small British trading post known as Fort Prince George, also known as Trent's Fort. Trent's Fort was established in the early 1740s by English merchant William Trent to conduct trade with the nearby Native American settlements. In an attempt to create a permanent French presence in the Ohio River Valley, the Governor-General of New France, Ange Duquesne de Mineville, also known as Marquis Duquesne, planned to fortify key locations from Lake Erie down to the forks of Ohio. Duquesne built a series of 4 French forts, with Fort Duquesne being the 4th in the series in the Ohio River Valley. The first 3 in the series of forts were Fort Presqu'Île, Fort Lebeuf, and Fort Marchot. All 4 forts shared a similar design of a rectangle with dimensions of 75 feet by 105 feet, with a bastion at each corner. A bastion being an angular defensive structure that projects outward from the curtain wall of a fortress that allows for defensive fire in multiple directions. Fort Duquesne was built at the confluence, the flowing together, of the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers, which come together to form the Ohio River. The French forts in the Ohio River Valley were built in response to concerns over British encroachment in the Ohio River Valley, which was claimed to be a part of New France. Fort Duquesne played a critical role in the French and Indian War on the North American continent. The British, hoping to halt the French expansion in the Ohio River Valley, led a series of expeditions to Fort Duquesne between 1755 and 1758. The first expedition was led by General Edward Braddock with the aid of Lieutenant Colonel George Washington, provincial officer to Braddock. Braddock and Washington moved towards Fort Duquesne with 1,400 men in the June of 1755, yet were attacked by the combined forces of Frenchmen, Canadians, and Native Americans about 10 miles away from the fort. Braddock and his men were unaccustomed to American frontier warfare, which was reflected in the 977 casualties of killed and/or wounded British forces compared to the only 39 casualties suffered by the combined French and Indian forces. This disastrous mission today is remembered as Braddock's defeat. This defeat led directly to the rise of George Washington in the Continental Army. Washington, the only surviving officer of the massacre, evacuated the remaining British forces and earned the title of Hero of the Monongahela and promotion to Colonel of the entirety of Virginia's forces. General John Forbes led the final British expedition on Fort Duquesne in the fall of 1758 with 6,000 men under his command, which included Washington and the combined forces from the tribes of both Cherokee and Catawba. On the night of November 24th, the night before the British planned to take the fort, Forbes received word from his Native American scouts that the French both abandoned Fort Duquesne and destroyed it. The French only had about 200 men manning the fort who suffered from limited food supply and low morale. Their commander, François-Marie Le Marchand de Lergeny, understood that his forces, now more limited than before due to the deserting of some of his Native American allies, could not withstand the British forces that outnumbered his own 30-1. Lergeny and his men used the cover of darkness to escape from the British forces. The British and American colonists rebuilt Fort Duquesne, this time 10 times larger, and named it Fort Pitt, after the British Prime Minister William Pitt, who was the one who ordered the capture of the strategically placed Fort Duquesne. The forays of George Washington into the Ohio country is what shaped his career. Washington gained invaluable military experience at the young age of 22 during the French and Indian War, which is one of the reasons the Continental Congress selected him as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army in 1775. During the American Revolution, the French sided with the American colonists led by George Washington, who only about 20 years prior was a great enemy to the French forces on the Ohio River Valley. This interestingly shows how quick allies and foes can change in war. On November 25, 1958, the 200th anniversary of the capture of Fort Duquesne, the U.S. Post Office issued a 4-cent Fort Duquesne bicentennial commemorative stamp. Colonel Washington is depicted on horseback in the center, while General Forbes, who is debilitated by intestinal disease, is shown lying on a stretcher. The stamp also depicts Colonel Henry Bouquet, who was second in command to the ailing Forbes, and the other figures who represent the Virginia militia and provincial army.